What is the worst way you or someone you know has been fired from a job? My first job ever was for Baskin-Robbins when I was 15. I went in for my first day of training excited to finally be making pocket money. The owner made me try to memorize the ice cream flavors in the first 30 seconds of being there. When I was unable to recite them perfectly in their order, he did this big hand motion and screamed training over. I laugh now, but man, that was crushing for a nervous teenager. Baskin-Robbins don't play. I worked in retail and our manager fired a guy after his 12-hour shift on Black Friday. Could have spent the day after Thanksgiving with his family, but instead, the manager made him work in case it was busy, then fired him at the end of his shift. It was a douche move. My dad told me once about a co-worker getting fired on Take Your Daughter to Work Day. It was before lunch too, so they both had to be escorted out of the office carrying their brown paper lunch bags. Heartless M. One capable IT employee was in the hospital due to an unexpected health emergency. They went to the hospital and fired him before his heart surgery. I crap you not. I had a friend who worked in an office doing office type crap. One day, his boss croaked and he was made interim boss. Anyways, he busted his butt in order to try and keep his new position. A month later, he interviewed. A week later, his boss called him into the office and said, "You know, we really wanted to hire you. I was rooting for you, but someone with more experience and qualifications got the job. Do you mind training him?" They asked him to train his replacement. I watched the same thing happen to a guy that trained me. He was store MGR for years, was the fix-it guy. Every 3 years they'd move him to another store that was in trouble and he'd flip it around and get it in shape. Regional spot opened up and he lost to a younger outside hire. Then asked him to train him for a month and drive him around to the various 20+ locations. I know someone who went to his company mailbox and found a paycheck. It was stamped term check. He went to his manager and asked about it. She said, "Oh, about that? You were fired. Leave the stapler." It's a long story, but I was early in my career. I wasn't fired for a good reason and I hadn't really stood up for myself yet. I just took abuse from management and did the best I could. It was my GM's birthday, and we all had to pick names out of a hat, and we had to buy them a cake etc for their birthday. Well, I had the GM, who wanted to do his birthday in the morning with bagels. So I picked up 30+ bagels, cream cheese, giant thing of coffee, and we had this stupid bagel birthday thing or whatever. Half hour later I get back to my desk, I'm called to HR and I was fired. Oh, and thanks for the bagels. Girl I knew was here on work visa. She had been working at a company for several years that treated her well but ended up moving and got a job at a new one. Her boss apparently used her as a scapegoat, set her up with impossible bull's tasks, like planning the office Christmas party about a week beforehand, then fired her shortly before Christmas. That meant her work visa expired and she was going to be sent back to her home country. Apparently it's the law that the employer in this case pay for the fired employee's plane ride home, and her boss chose to fly her out on Christmas. That is some bulls right there. Holy heck. Summon 17 people, 20% of the entire workforce, to the operations manager's office 8 AM Friday, the day before the company Christmas party, where bonuses are handed out, usually to the tune of $2k each. 2 weeks before Christmas, no job, no bonus, needing to cancel a date night with their SOS. Morale wasn't too good. 2 months later another wave of firings occurred. One of the guys was partying in LA the night before and called in sick. They forced his supervisor to call him repeatedly at home, telling him it was mandatory he showed up. He lived 35-40 minutes away. HR was waiting in the parking lot. Parked, they handed him a packet and check, turned around and drove 40 minutes back home. I worked at a place that was sold to investors. They brought in a hotshot CEO to bump up the numbers, then sold to our major competitor. During the transition, about 20 people were let go in one day. The head of HR, M, and the other HR employee, F, spent all day at it. It wasn't easy, since a lot of the employees had been there since the early days, 15+ years. There were tears, some shouting, the awkward "hey or just stand here casually while I make sure you don't get weird while you clean out your desk, also I'm so sorry this is happening" thing. After a whole day of that, the head of HR turns to the other HR employee and tells her, "Oh BTW, we're gonna have to let you go too." You may ask, how did I know there were tears, shouting, etc.? Because that skeezy butthole head of HR shared all the gory details with my co-worker the next day, in our open office workspace. She didn't ask, but he needed to tell someone. To this day I get mad thinking about it. That head of HR sounds super unqualified. We were having a departmental meeting, and the head of engineering, Myron, was giving a speech about how all of our customers are happy, and how all of his ideas are freaking awesome. Both of these were very false, so he was either lying or is disillusioned. Next his boss is giving her presentation, and the little email message popped up at the bottom corner of the screen saying you need to fire Myron. Myron was soon fired, and good riddance. And this is why we have a rule at my work that any sensitive HR subjects are not described in the subject line. Told my boss I had a 2-week mandatory training block coming up with my reserves unit. Got told there's no way I'm not working during that 2 weeks. Told him it's not like I have a choice. Got fired. That's illegal AF. Friend of mine helped secure a big contract for the company he was working for. An incentive for getting contracts is you get a percentage of the profit. He just started working there about 2 months prior and went out on his own several states away to talk to a potential customer from a lead he got at a convention. Basically, oh yeah, I have a buddy who's looking into that. You should meet him, in person out of his own pocket. He secured the deal, called his supervisor to tell him, was congratulated, then drove 12 hours back home. His payout would have come out to around $40,000 over 5 years, went into work the next day and was fired for suspicion of theft, and the boss of the division, not the supervisor, that guy's lower, would be taking over all his current stuff. He lawyered up immediately, but since he was still on his probationary period and they could fire him without cause, nothing but the finder's fee, around $3,000, was to be paid to him. Basically his boss tossed him to get some free money. You'd think that they would want to keep a guy with initiative that is performing well out of the gate. What a dumbass. I was fired from PetSmart for reasons I can no longer remember. Immediately after the manager delivered the news, she asked me if I would mind staying for 2 hours to wait until the evening shift relief arrived. Unpaid, of course. I laughed in her face and left. We got so many crap managers from PetSmart cause this one chick recommended all her friends, and they kept recommending other friends. Was fired 3 days after my kid was born for missing time because I requested the weekend that my ex was in labor off. Got the go ahead from my supervisor, but I guess that never made it upstairs to the top boss because they got rid of me, lol. I was working 20 featuring up a ladder on the side of a house. I hear a BB gun fire and the pellet hit the wall a few feet beside me. After a couple more of these I turn around, tell the fat kid standing in the yard if he does that crap again he better be able to outrun my hammer. Mom starts screaming about me threatening her kid. 15 minutes later I'm unemployed. My mom worked for a small medical practice that was fast on its way to bankruptcy. Her boss gave her a promotion without raise, and over the course of the next year, made her fire her co-workers one by one. She came to realize the reason she was promoted was so her boss could make her do the firing while he avoided everyone. Her co-workers saw what was happening, but still drifted away from their friendships with my mom as they saw her as an accomplice with the boss. The stress of firing her peers and feeling completely isolated at work was really eating away at my mom right up until the day her boss fired her, too. I'm sure there's worse ways to get canned, but my mom is a sweet woman who hadn't yet learned to speak up for herself, and I'm disgusted at the lack of character and integrity her boss had. See, I would never take a promotion without a raise. On night shift, a co-worker comes in and tries to log into the computer system. It doesn't work. She's locked out of everything. She'd also had trouble clocking in. The night shift supervisor is off that night. This lady starts freaking out and crying. She says she knew they were looking for a reason to fire her. When were they planning on telling her? What is she supposed to do now? Despite multiple people reassuring her that if they were going to fire her, this is not the way they would do it, and suggesting there might just be a mistake, she is still determined that she's been fired and they forgot to tell her before they cut her access. She goes home and doesn't come in the next night either. She won't answer calls, and is out for the rest of the next week. Turns out they hadn't fired her, but they had been looking for a reason to fire her. Not calling and not showing up for work was enough of a reason. So then she really was fired. That last paragraph sounds like the company's cover story. Girl was a M user and had a playful nickname Twitch among the nursing staff. Problem was, she was a major suck up to management, so they looked the other way and just called her quirky, until she twitched so hard she fell out of a chair and ruined a couple of blood samples, delaying a few surgeries, expensive liability, major public disaster, so a drug test could no longer be avoided. She made a second major scene fighting over giving one, and security escorted her out of our lives forever. I worked with a M user once. We called her Methy. Rude as crap and never shut the frick up. Lasted 2 months. Still don't know what she was ever trying to say to me. I was in a wreck on New Year's Day of 2009. A drunk driver hit me, injuring my leg up really badly. The driver didn't have insurance, their tags were fake, and their license was suspended at the time of the accident, so I was fricked. I couldn't walk and my job was being a soda merchandiser, so I was on my feet all day long. After reporting this to my employer, they told me to concentrate on getting well and to report back to management after seeing the doctor after a week or 2 of rehab. My doctor stated I may have to have surgery and wanted to run some tests, so I called my boss after an appointment. While I was being rolled out of the waiting room in a wheelchair, my boss fired me over the phone. I'm in a right to work state and was rejected on my FMLA claim, so I couldn't take off work without being penalized. Despite the urge from my employer to concentrate on getting better, I called an attorney and they only advised as if I was trying to get my job back. I wanted compensation for lost pay and emotional stress, but no one locally would take my case at the time. It was a crappy time. The computers in our ambulances are a little particular sometimes, and we always joke that we've been fired when a login doesn't work. Well, one day I could not get my login to work. Checked my email. Lo and behold, I'd been fired. At the end of the day it was what amounted to be a clerical misunderstanding, but so far it's taken almost a year to get it sorted. They broke up half of our office for a mandatory meeting on a Monday morning. They told our group they had sold our department and in 2 weeks we could either take the job with the new company or get lost. 5 minutes after they basically fired us all, they said, "Oh, by the way, here are your new bosses, so make a good impression." We were all angry and in shock, and later on I found out our soon-to-be ex-bosses were shocked and embarrassed by our reaction. I am so glad to be out of that shithole, though. I worked at a chiropractic office once. One of the girls found out she was being fired when she was on Craigslist looking for other jobs and found her job posted for another X-ray technician. She came to work pee and stripped off her scrubs in front of everyone and walked out in her undies. My hero. Walked out in her undies. What if she was just subconsciously into exhibitionism and it came out in a weird way? My buddy moved across the country for a job. At the end of his second week he was informed they were going to let him go as part of a large reduction in force. He had moved all of his stuff and signed a year lease of an apartment. When he complained that this really screwed him over and the company had to know this was coming well before he started and should have just told him to not come, his now former boss patted him on the back, chuckled, and told him something like "Life's not fair." My buddy ended up getting the last laugh. His dad's best friend was an attorney with all the right connections in that state. His old company settled with him when they were served with a lawsuit, claiming something like fraud and deception. He ended up settling for something that was over double his yearly salary. Life's not fair indeed. I got fired because my boss fricked up and blamed it on me. I started my own business in the same field and made all key people leave my former employer and work for me instead. A year later they had to file for bankruptcy. The malicious delight. I was walking into work and saw my co-worker friend being walked out by the cops. He stole money from the store and was caught. A week later, I was at a different store. Turns out, the kid got a job from that store also. He was getting walked out by the cops again for the same thing. It was unreal. Well, if at first you don't succeed. Our old manager was forced by her boss to fire a guy who was a bit slower than the other servers because he stood up for himself when someone called him retarded. He has autism. Now that's just evil. Not the worst I've read on here, but because it happened to me and still kind of stings a little, it feels bad to me. Previous company I worked for got into financial trouble. The month before, I'd been awarded a considerable raise for excellent performance, but they were losing contracts from customers and not much fresh business was coming through the door. I walked into work one day without any indication that anything was wrong. My boss had taken the day off. As it was a Friday, I didn't really think much of it. Next thing I know, my manager requested to see me in the private office. Nothing unusual. We were amidst planning a project and handed me a letter from my boss to say that I was fired. Coward didn't even have the balls to tell me to my face. They reasoned that it was due to unsatisfactory performance when I had not done anything wrong, and as I said earlier, had previously been awarded a raise for my performance in the company so far. It was because they needed to cut some costs, and because I was the last one through the door, I was first out. By firing me, they were only required to pay me my owed salary and nothing else. Where, had I been laid off, there would have been other financial responsibilities, that is, redundancy. So by firing me instead of laying me off, it was cheaper for them. Some of the other guys kept their jobs, but the company has since been liquidated and restarted under a slightly different name. Funny thing is, I still have full access to all of the company and customer systems. They haven't changed any admin passwords since I left. I have full administrator access to primary school computer systems. Good thing I'm not a vindictive prick, but that crap is bad. Not quite fired yet, but today 3 of us publicly confronted our boss over proof of her committing fraud and embezzlement. The organization serves people with mental health conditions, and we confronted her during a public meeting in front of those the organization serves. It was painful. We hated doing it, but the truth needed to come out. This one resonates to me as I was let go 3 weeks ago. So story time. I was hired at a company back in October by a woman whom I consider the best boss I ever had. Awesome person. Kickers marketer. We are still friends to this day. Anyway, at the end of December before we go on a New Year break, she tells us she is leaving for a much better company. I don't blame her. The company is awesome. Now when we get back, I instantly inherit all of her work and basically become a director of marketing without the title. I proceed to bust my butt to pick up all the new duties, make sure everything is attended to, and try to make a case for being the replacement. Well, the VP goes ahead and does interviews. We meet with some candidates. Ultimately they hire the one who was my last choice of the 4. I didn't like her. She was just off. Anyway, I take it in stride and just go back to doing my job well. For the next 3 weeks I proceed to continue doing all of the work I was doing before she arrived, and then some, while teaching her the business and how we did things. Well, 3 weeks ago today I come into the office, go about my routine, and then get pulled into an office where I see HR. I instantly feel sick to my stomach. She then proceeds to terminate my position due to budget and I am let go. No severance, no real explanation, nothing. So basically I manned a department for nearly 4 months, trained the new director, and was then laid off by her 3 weeks into her tenure. Oh, and I found out she quickly replaced me with a friend she had worked with at 4 other companies. Needless to say, it sucked and I was livid. Dang, man. That's some crap right there. I'm sorry to hear that. Hope you found a new job by now. I don't blame you one bit for being pissed off. I found out today when I got an email from a client stating, employee X was supposed to be here today and won't answer his phone. I make a couple calls only to find out employee X was asked to resign and nobody bothered to inform his accounts. I flew out of state to smooth things over. I'm in the hotel lobby right now, as this happened today. I was once on vacation when a bunch of people got let go. Workforce reduction based on seniority by department. When I got back, they sent out an email explaining that all the firings were over and everyone reading the email had nothing to worry about. I guess they forgot that they still had to fire the guy that was on vacation. Though, after reading the "You're safe" email, I was cleaning out my desk. The post-firing story is even crazier. Immediately after I left, one of my co-workers went to our boss and told her he was finalizing details to take a new job and hadn't broken the news yet. Our department couldn't lose 2 people, so they asked me to come back. This was my dream job at the time. So I tore up the firing paperwork, came back and worked there for another 8 years, including a promotion, and then left on my own terms when I landed a dream job. In the end, me getting fired was me spending a few days at home with full pay. I was one of a group of 13 teachers who were laid off from a struggling private school. The decision had been made to get rid of year 11 and 12 as a cost-cutting measure, so therefore Shaf had to go. The way we were told if we were being laid off or not was a letter placed in our pigeonhole by the school principal, who ensured he had left for the day and gone home so no one could confront him about it. He also again proceeded to hide in his office with the door locked when he did come back to work. We then had to work for another term before we finished for the school year. What a coward. A former colleague of mine said she had some big news to tell me and she'd be in town for a few days and wanted to grab some drinks. We chit-chatted some small talk about how work was going, and I mentioned that I was about to fire a development company we worked with and had already signed a contract with their replacement. I went on and on for a few minutes about how pathetic the former partner's productivity had been and how it had hit rock bottom over the years. Then she told me her big news. She had just accepted a position at the company I was firing the next day, and she was assigned to be my project manager. Needless to say, the rest of the drink meeting was a bit awkward. They almost fixed the problem in time. This happened to me. Had my 90-day review and everything went well. Got excellent scores across the board. Boss asked if I had anything I wanted to talk about and I brought up a few issues I had that I thought we should work on if that position was to be a long-term one. These were things like communication between he and myself, weekend calls, etc. I wasn't leaving. I just wanted to work on things to make sure I didn't wind up rage quitting. The next day his wife comes into the office. I don't work for her. She runs a sister company but she's the boss's wife. We discuss the same things my boss and I discussed. A while later I start getting emails replying to a Craigslist ad for my job. My boss comes in the next day at me. His wife told him I quit. I wasn't even going to argue. That made it clear it wasn't an environment I wanted to be a part of. Crazy lady from the restaurant I work at was found by another server passed out, forehead on the steering wheel 45 minutes after her shift was over and later found out she OD'd on H. She was already on thin ice for getting caught buying weed during her shift and the neighboring business saying she's sucking some guy's dong for either drugs or money. She was taken away by the police who said if we didn't report this she most likely would have died. There was also a cook who during his shift just disappeared and only later found out he left because of some problem with his friend buying drugs and getting revenge against his girlfriend. I worked for this woman who owned a bakery business with several locations. She was a class A lunatic, but she paid well and for the most part I loved my job. I was constantly told I was one of her best employees, and one day she wanted me to be a manager at one of the stores. Honestly, I gave my all at that job because she paid me well above minimum wage for someone who had zero experience in a bakery position prior to hire and I enjoyed making cupcakes for a living. 3 weeks before Christmas she came into the store and told me that if the police showed up to give her a call in her office so she could come upstairs to meet them. Weird, but she was always dealing with something crazy like a customer she insulted or the like. Anyways, the cops came and she took them into her office to talk to them and that was that. Well, after we closed the store that night she called me aside and accused me of stealing money out of the register. She has cameras all over her store and told me she had hidden ones even the employees didn't know about. She caught me doing suspicious things on camera such as taking an envelope off the counter and coming back into the store after I had already locked up to get something I forgot. Just weird and baseless accusations. She told me she had called the cops on me to file a police report and they would be wanting to talk to me at some point. She then fired me and took away my keys for the store and I left. I was devastated and for the following week I was a nervous, depressed wreck. I had never taken anything from her, ever. I later found out from a friend who still worked there she told every single employee I stole $3,000 plus dollars from her, and probably stole her checkbook as well because it was missing. Again, this lady was insane and I have no doubt she's the type of person to put her checkbook on top of her car and forget about it while driving away. She also told everyone who still worked there they weren't allowed to talk to me at all. That also really upset me because I really enjoyed my co-workers, but I knew most of them were so afraid of her and losing their jobs if they didn't bend to her every whim they just obeyed. For weeks after being fired she'd randomly call and text me, and if I didn't immediately answer she would call and text my girlfriend and threaten to have the police come to our house if I kept ignoring her. Finally she stopped. Until about 2 weeks ago she started harassing me again, trying to set up some sort of meeting to talk about why she fired me, but I pretty much told her it can be a phone conversation or she can frick off, and I haven't heard from her since. Honestly, I'm waiting for some crazy letter saying she's trying to sue me for God knows what. TLDR. Crazy but ex-boss wouldn't stop harassing me and lying about me for God knows what reason. If you do meet, don't say anything stupid. My bet is she wants to record you and try to spin it as your confession. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.